Why do you want them to listen to your podcast?
So that when they think about starting a business, they've got the content that is pointing them in the right direction.
That is such a valuable piece of advice there.
The change in mindset makes a massive difference.
Welcome to Aussie Lawn Stars.
Welcome to Aussie Lawn Stars, Renae. How are you doing?
I'm great, Gary. Thanks. How are you?
I'm a little bit hot in the dungeon today, but that's the way it is. Now, you haven't actually listened to my podcast, so I need to just explain this. The dungeon in my house is the room that has no external windows.
Okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if you're a bit of a Dungeons and Dragons fan or whether you were just had some weird, creepy room.
No, definitely not. Neither of those. Just happens to be that the room has no external windows, doesn't breathe, but it's really good sound quality.
So better than hiding in a closet, I guess.
So one day I might get enough money out of the podcast to actually put an air conditioner in here.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. So, Renae, you're only probably 45 minutes down the road from me.
Yes, not far at all. I was quite surprised to learn that we actually live in the same locality, but...
Yeah. Where I'm working most of the time is more like 15, 20 minutes away from you, but where I'm recording in my dungeon, a little bit further in.
Yeah, no, the Central Coast is actually a bigger place than I thought. There's quite a few of us contractors around that we touch base with every now and then.
Yeah, that's it. I think if you drive from the southernmost point down what's past Woy Woy, right down the bottom there.
Pearl Beach.
Yeah, Pearl Beach.
Tatonga,
if you go from Pearl Beach all the way up to the northern end of the Central Coast, you're talking almost Wyee or Gondolin. It's it's a good solid hour's drive.
Yeah, no, the coast is definitely bigger than a lot of people think, and it's definitely grown a lot in the last few years and changed a lot too. So.
Yeah, that's for sure. I know when I was a kid, because I grew up in Cooranbong, and when I was a kid, I was looking at Central Coast going, it's rapidly growing. It's getting a lot of people from Sydney moving out of Sydney onto the Central Coast, and then more recently, everyone moves out of Sydney to Queensland, right?
Yeah. Or up to the Central Coast, and then everyone moves from the Central Coast up further to get away from the Sydney siders. So.
Well, in Cooranbong now, the growth in Cooranbong is only explainable by people moving from Sydney to Cooranbong.
That is crazy. I remember when I was younger, my parents had bought a house in the Blue Haven area, and Blue Haven literally consisted of about 5 streets at that time. Like Rope Road was just bush. There was nothing. It was this suburb in the middle of nowhere with a few streets, and now it's just built out like crazy. The same with Cooranbong, Morisset, Wyee, all that area was bush, and now it's just being developed at crazy rates.
Yeah, I can remember when Blue Haven wasn't really a suburb; it was more bush than houses.
And that's when I lived there when I was little. But it's changed quite a lot over the years.
Yeah, there you go. So, how many years do we need to rewind the clock back to when you started your business? And we really need your husband on this one too, don't we?
We do, because it's got a bit of a double-edged story to it. So Dan, my husband, started his original version of this business when he was 12, pushing a lawnmower around Carryong on a Saturday, and his mum would take him between jobs in her old Toyota Tarago red van, and then he'd get out and he'd do a job, and then he'd wheel the mower up the street to the next job, and then wheel to the next job, and that sort of stuff. So he started it as a kid, and he grew it into a fairly decent sized business himself, which worked well. He bought our house when he was 18 from lawn mowing revenue from all those years as a teenager. He had a fairly decent size customer base, but he just primarily worked in Carryong, and then he got his P's and he worked around there. And he did that till we were about, 23, at which stage he'd graduated from uni. We went into the corporate world and started running other types of businesses, and actually moved away from the coast with our roles in business development, at which stage he then gave the business to his brother. His brother then ran it for a while, and then went off to his mechanic career, and then gave it to his younger brother. So that version of the business sort of went all through the brothers, and that younger brother still runs a version of that original business today. He's changed his name, obviously, and he now only looks after stratas, but he had gone through that residential thing. And to cut a long story short, after spending a lot of years in the corporate world and being stuck inside and we were running service stations and then news agencies and a lot of, long hours and stuff. And we were out in Muswellbrook for the last 6 of those years and decided we needed to come back to the coast to be closer to family. The kids had some sort of health challenges. We wanted to be able to give them more opportunities with schooling and just thinking sort of long term. So came back to Carryong. We packed everything up and travelled the States for about 3 months in an RV with the kids because years and years of running businesses were very exhausting. Got back there and Dan's like, well, I don't really know what I want to do. While I find a job that I think might be appropriate for me, I'm just going to go mow through a few lawns. I'll give my brother a little bit of a hand for a while. And then that turned into him buying back half of our original residential clients, that some of the old ones from he still did as a teenager.
Wow.
And then that was about 7 years ago now. So he started under our current name, which was the Out of Time, and it's just gone bonkers. So from something that he was just going to do for 6 months while he had a break from the corporate world, you can't drag him away from it. So I'm definitely more involved in this second version of the business, which is now, instead of just being his side gig while he was doing uni and stuff, it's now the focus.
So you were actually a part of his life in the first iteration by the sounds of it, when he bought his first house, your first home together, right, at 18?
We've been together since we're 16 years old, yes. So even back in those days, I was on the tools in a various form on a Saturday when, a big lawn was like $20 for a mow or $25 for a mow back in the early days, which makes it sound old. But so I've seen it change in quite a lot of ways. I would just help him out every now and then to actually now being actively involved in a lot of different roles in the business as it's grown from just a one-person sole trader into a company that employs quite a lot of employees, has a lot of different arms.
Okay. Yeah. So your first iteration, you've got to be a little bit younger than me, but it's probably before I first started my business, of course. Right. I started mine 15 years ago. Right. So 2010. But you're saying that this second iteration's been going for 7 years.
Yeah, so the second one's really been going since about 2016. So we're probably coming up to about 9. He only, again, sort of did it part-time, helped his brothers with other things, did a few other bits and pieces, was with fire and rescue. So really him actually deciding to work properly in the business and turn it into a business would have been about 2019. Before that, it was just a side bit of an income. So really 5 or 6 years we've had employees for, running multiple crews and growing in that direction. So it's brought in a whole lot of new challenges rather than being just a one-person opportunity that is solely responsible for everything. Trying to replicate your quality of work and keep everyone motivated has been, the challenges of going bigger. So.
Yes, and most of that growth has been through COVID and post-COVID.
Yes, which was really quite surprising. It was sort of the start of COVID when we just put on our first, Dan had an offsider, but then he just put on a crew. So in the December 19, we'd bought a new ute and we'd bought a whole set of equipment and hired 2 new staff to go into COVID. And obviously COVID started, like prior to COVID kicking in. Yeah. Obviously COVID started, kicking in around that February, March, and we were really quite concerned, thinking, what have we done? We've just invested all of this money. How are we going to keep these staff in a job? Because my way of thinking, and also working as a side job in healthcare, as I was at that time too, people would, if they didn't have jobs, they wouldn't have money. So therefore they wouldn't, have all these luxury services, or what I consider as a luxury service, like lawn mowing and stuff. We thought, okay, some of the real estates would probably keep theirs. The elderly people on age funding would still need their assistance. But we were actually surprised by the fact that people were still busy. I think because they were home all the time, they were really looking at their yards and their gardens, and they're like, well, I don't have the skills, or I don't have the time, or I just don't want to do this because I'm working from home now and I'm really busy. So we didn't really actually lose many customers through COVID, which was really surprising. The work that came in.
It's an interesting proposition we look at, because lawn care has been a recent phenomenon in any area which has developed. The idea of mowing somebody else's lawn for money is something which has come about as a result of people prioritizing their time with other things.
Yeah. And that's basically where our name comes from, Out of Time. We use our time to save your time, and that's our tagline, and that's sort of where it come back from. And you can spend what little precious time you have with your family, or you can, you do and get someone else to mow your lawn, or you can be spending looking at the fact that people are working longer hours, the cost of living's increasing, so they're, gone at 6 in the morning, not home till 7 at night. They don't want to be spending those precious 1-2 hours on the week, which is what it takes them with the domestic equipment to get in there and do their yard to the standard that it requires. It's, probably triple the time that we do it with 2 crew. So people are actually really starting to value time with family more, and I think that's a change in society values as well. Like, people want to spend their time with family, friends. They don't want to be doing that sort of stuff.
I think the other aspect there is that was probably true closer to the big city, the big smoke.
Yep.
Back when, so my childhood is 80s and 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at it back then and I go, okay, Cooranbong was in the sticks, but also Central Coast wasn't really considered an extension of Sydney at that stage, right? So it's through that time where people have started going, all right, I'm willing to travel from Central Coast to Sydney for work. So we have become an extension of the big city philosophy of life, where everyone is focused more on, have a work job that keeps me going and then get precious little time with the family. So that's... Yeah.
And I think the extension of that too is because it's becoming an extension of Sydney. It's becoming more expensive to live here. So you really can't live on the coast on one income. You really need that double income. And, a lot of the coast are still commuting to Sydney, working to Sydney, which makes them even more time poor than they were, living in Sydney. But then again, sometimes the commute from the coast to Sydney, I know for me, is less than, when you're driving around in Sydney. So it's just, it's the landscape of the trade that we provide and the industry that we're both in, I think, has definitely changed quite a lot over the last, 10 years, specifically over the last 5. I've definitely seen a big change in it since COVID.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know when I started my business, it was 2010, and Cooranbong was still not majorly affected by people travelling to and from Sydney. And I've known people all my life who would live in Cooranbong, travel down the train line to Sydney and back. So it's not like it hasn't happened, but the majority of people now in my area will travel long distances to get to work.
Well, as you know, my other side gig is a midwife, and I work at the SAN in Sydney, and quite a few of my colleagues live in Cooranbong and travel down there. So, it's just, and to them, it's just a normal, 1 hour commute that they do 5 times a week each way. So it doesn't seem, when they say Cooranbong, I'm like, oh, that's so far away. Your commute time is crazy. And they're like, well, no, it's not really any more than if I lived at Western Sydney and had to come in because of the traffic. So
it's probably not a lot different to your commute time to the SAN, is it? I mean, yours is probably closer to half hour, but it would still be more than half an hour.
Yeah, it's closer to 40 minutes, providing the freeway's behaving itself. If the freeway's not behaving itself, it can take 3 hours. But generally on a traffic-less drive, it'd be about 35 minutes from, sort of my door to the SAN, which works well.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that's quite manageable. Yeah, so that change has definitely affected what it looks like to run a business. And for me, when I first started in 2010, I would say that the majority of my customers were people who were local and elderly. And now you could quite easily focus on people who are young and don't want to spend time on their weekends mowing lawns when they could be spending time with their family.
Yes, and a lot of the customers now too is sort of changed into their rentals, or they're in rentals. So they don't even own the house. So they're not really seeing, benefit from investing their time in maintaining someone else's yard, so to speak. So we have a lot more rental clientele as well through real estates, but also through themselves, that will get the basic maintenance done because they, again, are time poor, but it's not their property. So they're not really seeing value in, spending the extra time and maintaining, which brings other challenges as well. But yeah, definitely it's the scope of customers has really changed from just elderly or business owners or people that want that sort of assistance because they can't really do it themselves, to people that just don't want to do it because they want to spend their time doing other things, or they don't want to invest in the equipment. They don't know how to use the equipment to its best, best profile. So it's definitely changed.
Yeah, I know over time, and I'm not doing this now, but when I was building my residential clientele, I would deal with 3 or 4 real estate agents, and whenever I would talk to landlords, I would promote lawn mowing as a way of making sure their rental was kept clean and tidy. And so
Yeah.
I'm not going inside your house, but I do notice what's going on around your house. So we keep the yard tidy. And if something else that seems a little bit suspicious, and there's been a few times where I contact the real estate agent and say, hey, you might want to check on your tenants because they're doing a lot more gardening and it's not veggies.
Yes, they don't really want us to pull out those weeds. Yeah, no, it's definitely, there's benefits of building the good relationship with real estates and landlords. And one of the things we've tried to put in is, well, you can add your extra $30 a week or $40 a week onto your rent, and that'll pay for, a lawnmower once a fortnight. And you can guarantee that someone's coming and looking after your yard and looking after your gardens, because tenants, in a lot, not all cases, but in a majority of cases, being time poor or just not having the equipment, they're going to do the bare minimum to get through the house inspections and just keep, in the property as they can. And we've got one client at the moment that's notorious. Every few months, the yard will be knee to thigh high, and it'll be a couple $100, and they'll only do it because they're due for an inspection and they're going to get a warning to be, sent out. But we promote that as a way, you build it into your rent that you charge your tenant. You make sure that the lawn's done every 3 weeks. It's kept nice. You're not getting big bald patches in your grass. You're not getting, weeds overtaking and clover and ricardia. Like you're going to have a nice grass, because your street value on your property is important, and it makes you as your landlord feel good when you drive past it. Like it's your investment. You spend so much money looking after it, and you want to make sure that people look after it when you're not there.
Yeah. So, that is something which has changed, because I know over time I've noticed that more and more rented properties become part of our industry. Just that was a way of maintaining that the property value and keeping an eye on it.
And then you get the other end of the coin. They haven't had any services while they've been rental, but we do the end of lease cleanups because the tenants have let the yard grow so ridiculously that the real estate now needs to put a bond claim in and, go from there. And it's just sad in a way, because the tenants are then out of that bond when they go on, and, the owner's sort of left in a mess.
I've talked to so many lawn care professionals over the last 3 years with podcasting, and some of them say, I absolutely will not do cleanup jobs. I will only do regular maintenance. And others say, cleanup jobs are where the money is.
So it's good in both. Like we do a fairly big mix of both. We work closely with a couple of one of the big franchises. They have a couple of local guys running around here, and he will only do lawns. Every time he gets a cleanup or a garden or a gutter or something, he'll flick the details to us, and we'll flick him back a lawnmower. And, we work in conjunction like that, because he's like, I'm too old. I don't want to be doing hedging. I don't want to be doing garden cleanup. He works by himself. I just want to go there. I just want to mow the lawn, get my, $80, $90, and away I go on to the next one. I don't want to have specialist equipment. I don't want to have be trained in skills, because they are skills to actually know how to clean up a garden and make it look nice properly, to understand, what's a weed versus what's a plant. And as Dan always says, a weed is something that's not meant to be in the garden. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a weed as such, but if you've got a cottage garden and you've got some sort of, something growing there that clearly doesn't belong, then that's, the weed as well. So you've got to move it. And the eye for detail is, cleanups are really good in the fact that they're very satisfying to do as well. You get a really good result, and you can make good money from cleanups, providing you quote them properly and you allocate the appropriate amount of time and have the right gear.
Now, you just touched on something that's going to bring us full circle here, but you're talking about the eye for detail. Now, in my experience, I've had numerous employees. I only have one employee with me at the moment. I've got a couple of casuals I can call on, but I've got one permanent employee with me at the moment. She has been outstanding in terms of attention to detail because she's female. Yeah. And, that you could say, well, that's not exclusively true, and men can have attention to detail. And there's a lot of comparisons we can do back and forth. But I'm doing an interview with you today specifically because I want to identify within my podcast that there are a significant number of women in our industry, and not only are they here, but mostly they have the strength to do all of the jobs that are needed, and they have better attention to detail on average than what men do.
Look, I have to agree with you in the fact that I obviously work for the business. 3 of our daughters work in our business.
Wow.
2 are on the tools all the time. Another one is admin, but she's out on the tools as well. Obviously, Dan has the attention to detail because it's his business and he's got the motivation to make sure everything's perfect.
Yep.
The boys or the guys on the crew, they try, but they just, for some reason, and it's not, I don't know what it is, but they just don't seem to have the same amount of attention to detail. So we'll give it to the girls, and we have employed external females before that have come into the business and worked for a period of time while they've done things. And again, the compliments that come back from the job, we rarely get complaints when the girl crews are out and about or when there's a girl on the crew with a guy, because everything just seems to get done. The tasks are taken off, the attention to detail, and we'll get really great feedback saying, I just want the girls back from now on because the paths were blown perfectly, there was no grass on my mat, just certain little things, or, the attention to the garden cleanup. So I do tend to agree with you in that respect. The attention to detail from our female employees is double that of our other guys. And the guys do try hard, but I just think it's a different level of, I have no idea why, but it is just a different level.
Well, I think being a business owner makes a big difference because, like you say, Dan's motivated because it's his business, your business. But I can think of one other guy that I've interviewed where he recognised the same sort of attention to detail as being a massive priority for his customers. And he was talking about the same thing you mentioned there about grasping on the doormat, that sort of thing, that paying particular attention to what the customer sees when they first get there.
Even simple things, like I find I don't have to remind the girls, for example, to shut bin lids and to shut gates, and I don't have to write, please do this. Whereas a lot of the younger ones, I'll be like, they seem to just tunnel on their job and not have that peripheral around them of, what else can, look good. Whereas, they just seem to do it. And it is the little things, especially, the elderly clients that you pull the green bin out to the curb because they're not strong enough to do it next week.
Yes,
or, just those little things that go above and beyond make a huge difference in the business.
Yeah, it really does. So I guess that is something which gets harder to manage when you have to trust employees out there without you or Dan holding their hand.
Yes, it is. There's no magic solution, really. Like everyone else has issues sometimes. People can be having a bad day. They can be just a bit bored with the work because they've done the same job over and over. They might be up to 15 mows for the same yard this year, and it's just, they sort of focus on getting the job done and getting through their day. And, the younger guys might be focused on what party they're going to that night or, the gym time or footy training. So motivating them and trying to get them to take pride in their work is definitely an ongoing thing. And I always say to my crews, look, you need to think at every job, would you pay for this? You need to actually walk around the yard, look at everything and say, would I pay for this? And if your answer is no, you haven't done your job properly. We're still trying to trial KPIs, and we look at motivations, and, we go to the crews, if you've had the crew with no complaints this week, we'll get this. We do, sometimes we do afternoon pizzas, we do staff motivation days. It's really hard to try to get in this industry, work out, like a KPI system, because the crews are forever changing. It's not the same people on the same jobs. It's, different skill mixes. You might have someone that's been with us for 4 years and finished his horticultural apprenticeship and is fast and strong and great on the equipment, and he might be having the new apprentice, which is, first year, that's going to slow him down because he doesn't have the same skill mix. But the apprentice can't drive by himself because he doesn't have a license and he needs help. So it's trying to find that. One of the things that we do really well is we pay a good crew leader allowance. So every hour they get a decent amount on top of their normal thing, and that's for them to take that responsibility of making sure the jobs are done, that the photos are uploaded, motivating and training your other person. So little things like that can help, but if you know the magic solution, I'd be happy to hear it.
So how many crews do you have out on the road on average each day?
On average each day, between 3 to 5 plus Dan.
Okay,
So we have 4 main vehicles that run around, plus we have an extra one that goes out as we need. So some of our staff have uni on different days. So some that, the apprentices are off at TAFE on certain days. So some days you might only have 2 crews, and then you'll have a day where everyone's available. So we'll have 4 to 5 crews plus, plus an extra running around. Yeah, exactly. And go from there.
Yeah, it's enough people out there to keep you very busy trying to juggle all of the jobs, make sure the scheduling's done right, make sure that those people actually do what they need to do.
That does, and that has been a huge issue. It's only been the last probably 3 years I've managed to wrangle Dan's A4 paper diary off him with threat of belting him over the head with it. And, he would sit down, because when he ran the business before, everything was managed on an A4 paper diary. You write your lawn down, 2 weeks later you write your rebooking, you tick when they're paid, and away you go. And then he would transcribe them onto handwritten run sheets that were ridiculous. And with his messy writing, because he's busy thinking of other things, there was, 2 or 3 occasions the crews would rock up and mow someone's lawn that didn't even exist as our customer. Like, it was the right number, but the wrong street, or the right street, that sort of thing, or the house next door because they wouldn't read his writing. And,
Yep.
and I'm just like, this is just not working anymore. You can't possibly think of everything in your brain when you are trying to manage so many jobs and so many customers, and every job needs something different. And, Dan was spending hours every night and hours every morning sitting there because only he would know the stuff in his head about the job, writing a note, this address, and, make sure that this goes here, and don't forget the vine on the right side of the fence, and this dog runs away, and that fence is broke, and
Yep.
you can't do it. You can't possibly hope to be efficient, effective, and keep customers happy when you're not scheduled properly, and you're not sorted, and you're not organised, and there's not a system where the staff can see what's been done or what's due. Or that's really important. That's been one of the biggest struggles in our business, is
Yep.
getting on top of that.
Are you thinking of leaving your job to start a profitable and enjoyable lawn and garden business? Aussie Lawn Stars shares stories, lessons, and advice to help you grow a healthy, productive, efficient, and sustainable business. Got questions or want more information? Contact Aussie Lawn Stars at iCloud.com or reach out to Gary Ashton on Facebook or Messenger for personal help. But beware, your question may end up in a podcast episode. For business coaching that ensures the right mindset and decision-making approach, check out Think Tank Coaching. Their website is https://thinktankcoaching.com.au. They've been instrumental in helping me and can guide you towards achieving your business goals. You can also email them at thinktankcoaching@outlook.com. You would have heard of Lawn Hub.
I believe I have.
So Lawn Hub's run by Clint Adams.
Right.
It sells fertilizer stuff, but he's a
Yes.
he runs multiple businesses.
Right.
And yeah, I think the name is suggestive, much like Aussie Lawn Stars is a little bit suggestive. But the reason I ask is because I interviewed Clint Adams recently, and the interview I published only 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were talking about this issue of why people will go from solo to my size of having one regular employee to your size of having multiple teams, and anywhere in between, but they usually will grow, shrink. As they grow, they pull back because those problems are all too hard to deal with.
Exactly.
And shrink again.
I think that's a big problem in any business, but also particularly challenging in our industry because, we waste a lot of time and a lot of employee dollars in drive time between jobs, as does everyone. Yep. So scheduling, again, being able to cut down your drive time, know what jobs work best on which run, which days you're in the area and stuff. I think that is one of the challenges why businesses do tend to grow. They're like, oh, let's put on another crew. This is going to be great. We'll have 2 more guys. I can, take some time off the tools and I can do whatever. And that's great. But then they're like, hang on, I've got 1 staff or 2 staff running around and they're spending, 3 hours of their day between drive time, between jobs. And now I've got to try to factor in that I'm not this sole trader anymore and it's not my leftover profit. I've got to factor all these things into the hourly cost rate and then I'm losing money. So I'll just get rid of those staff and go back to myself and it'll be easier to manage, easier to run, and I'll kind of make more money. I've heard that quite a lot from other people in the industry when I've done little bits of consulting or had chats about, how their business is growing, what they want to do, what they want to retrieve. I'd spoken to someone that, has one person that goes around doing all the ride-on jobs and then they have another crew follow behind them doing the whippersnipping and the blowing. Yep. And, different things which works for them. But do you know what I mean? Like, I just can't see that wouldn't work for us. Like, we make sure the crews have the equipment just to do it and go because the drive time and the waste following behind that.
This is why if you pull back and you have say 40 to 50 really good customers, that can be enough for one person working solo on their own. They can have a really good income, and they're intimately acquainted with each customer's property. They don't have to explain it to somebody else.
Yeah. And there is definite benefits about being a sole trader. As I said, one of Dan's mates that works for the franchise, he just wants to be a sole trader. He doesn't want to grow, doesn't want to grow bigger. He's happy with his capped numbers. That works for him. That does whatever. However, he's only been in the industry for maybe 2 or 3 years since he left his job doing whatever else. We're mindful of the fact that as we get older, or particularly as Dan gets older, it's really hard on the body. The knees start playing up, the ankles start playing up, the wrists start playing up, and if something happens and you're off the tools or you're hurt, where's your income then? No one can kind of step in and do that. And just to throw back to someone we've all listened to, I think Mike Andes did a really good podcast on that particular thing, in a book about when he got hurt and the whole business just didn't exist because it was him and he was in a bad car accident. And I guess we have to all think down the track. A lot of, not as many females have their own businesses in there, but a lot of the guys that are sole traders are the sole income providers for their family, or they, provide a large majority of that income, and they have young kids. And I always think about what happens if they get hurt. God forbid they get killed, if they have a bad accident because you spend a lot of time driving in the car, we're working with really dangerous equipment, people flip ride-ons, people get hurt. Where is your income then? Who's going to provide for your family?
But you're speaking like a woman there, and not a slight against you. That's a positive.
Thank you.
And if you look at the average guy that goes and runs a lawn mowing business, the only thing they are mindful of is sooner or later I'm going to get old, and I've had surgery on my knee.
He's had surgery on his knee too. It seems to be a thing. Yeah.
You start going, how much longer can I physically do the work? Whereas a woman is going to be going, well, family, kids, and household, and all the things that a woman's brain is going to be thinking about. How do I juggle all of these things and make sure that my work is sustainable and can be maintained? Yeah, but you mentioned Mike Andes, and I was actually going to bring that name up as well. So when you're talking about managing employees and KPI, he is one of the gurus in our industry that really seems to understand that well and have put systems in place.
Yeah.
More than any franchise that I know of.
He's done really well, and I've listened to his lot of stuff on it, and I'd really like to implement some of the things he does. However, the big challenge I find is the difference between the United States and Australia.
Yes.
Their average wage is $7, $8 an hour over there.
That's right.
Our average wage is $25 over here.
I have a less politically correct way of saying that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just really hard. And again, I looked at using his software for performance, which was great, but $200 a month is 350 Australian dollars a month.
Yep.
You're losing most of your profit. It doesn't really work. So he's got a lot of great ideas.
Yeah.
And I like, what he's done and how he motivates his employees and that sort of stuff. But trying to convert it into how it might work in Australia with our, workplace relation laws and our minimum wages and our minimum hours and all the overtimes and the bonuses and the awards. A classic example is the Landscape Garden Award, which we all operate under. It doesn't allow for casual school kids on the weekends. It's after 12 Saturdays is overtime, and it just doesn't make sense for a 16-year-old who wants to come and mow lawns on a weekend. You're not going to pay him $40 an hour. You're not going to make any money. So it's not geared for, anyone other than full-time employees, really. And it doesn't take into account that kids can't work during their school hours. They want a job on the weekends. We don't have the same sort of structural bases that we can use to develop a lot of the systems he does, unfortunately. But
yeah, that's very true. And I think there's always going to be some significant differences between the US and Australia that will make it hard to translate some of those things across. But I do think his KPI model is worthwhile of a closer inspection. I think it's not that we could do it exactly, but certainly it gives some inspiration to help keep employees motivated to work and treat it a little bit more like it's their own business.
Oh, definitely. I had a little bit of a look into the trial, and I want to spend some more time looking into it. I think definitely it works because, as he said, and as we get that same sort of feedback from our staff. One of them gets in and they go, and they do it and they have the other job. The other one's, dragging the chain on the phone, going to the bathroom every 5 minutes. It's too hot, he needs to sit down. It's too wet, and it's too this and it's too that. So if we can figure out a similar system, or even, my candies, if you ever listen to this, please just make your Australian software cheaper. Like it would work in a beneficial way, because I think
get in his ear and tell him that he needs to do an interview with Aussie Lawn Stars, because I've been trying to reach him and it's very hard.
Well, he's busy trying to set up his franchise system in Australia, I believe. So
I'd love to get an interview with him, and it would be a great opportunity for him to talk about what he wants to do in Australia, as much as it would be for us to learn a little bit more from him.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's just, I take my hat off to him in a way. Like, as I said, he come back from the big accident. Most people would give up. He's turned around, reinvented stuff. And, like he's well known and he has a lot of things. And, even his idea in America that I think is great, that in winter, because their grass doesn't grow over Christmas, they offer the Christmas light installation and removal service. Like, ways that they add different things on just is really good. And, I think we in Australia can learn a lot from them.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to find his personal phone number and just hound it and say, "Come on, Mike, interview time."
I think it'd be definitely interesting to hear his take on how he would work a lot of these things in Australia with, our conditions. And look, Sydney's the number one city, most expensive city in the world to live in now. Like,
So it is primed for him to come in with his systems.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So we'll come back to systems sometime soon, but want to take a little bit more of a dive into what your company structure looks like at the moment. So we've talked about the fact you've got several teams operating. You're doing a fair bit of administrative work, but you're not the only one doing administrative work.
No. So we actually have gotten to the point about a year and a half ago, we had to put an admin assistant on for taking calls, doing bookings, sending out invoices, because it was just becoming too much for one person, even with software and systems trying to do it. And we actually got the kick in the pants because our second daughter was on exchange in America for 6 months with university, and she was also one of our staff members, and she was going to be over there with Christmas by herself. So we thought, well, we both can't go with this business. We can't take the whole family with this business. And it come down to the fact that being right in the middle of Australian summer, Dan couldn't be spared, but I kind of could if, punch came to shove. And I'm like, how am I going to be doing all of this invoicing? I can't answer calls in America. I can't. The time difference is 18 hours. Like,
that doesn't work.
It's just not going to work to run the business. So we then started putting an admin assistant on, and she originally started off part-time on a couple of days a week. She's now on 5 days a week. And she, as I said, answers our phone calls. She does email inquiries. She takes our bookings. She has a chat to the customers. We had to take some of the stress off Dan as well, because even before we had Chloe in admin, I was doing all the invoicing, the accounts payable, the wages, all of that kind of stuff. But he was stopping to answer. And he showed me his phone one day when he was about to tear his hair out. And he'd had like 114 calls for the day and 70-something messages. And he's like, this is ridiculous. Like, I can't think, I can't manage, I can't organize. And as a service-based business, everyone wants to talk to Dan. Everyone wants, they want Dan, they want message. So part of it was getting a 1300 number for our business and trying to educate our customers. So we use a platform for the 1300 number. There's a phone in the office, but it also has an app on my mobile, Dan's mobile, whatever else. So the office number will ring, and then if it's not answered, it'll then feed through to Dan's mobile, and he can either choose it. And it was done for two reasons. Firstly, productivity. So, the customers, our jobs are mostly fixed rates, so they don't mind. They don't care if he answers the phone because they know the job's going to get done. They're paying the same thing. But while he's on the phone booking, Mary Jo's lawn down the street, the apprentice is off there sitting around on his phone doing whatever. And, jobs were taking longer and longer. It was dangerous. He can't be up a roof cleaning a gutter or chopping down some sort of a hedge tree and then trying to answer the phone all the time. And it just wasn't working in that respect. So it come to the point a lot for his mental health as well, just to be able to switch off. And the thing I find with customers, and they still do it, they'll think nothing of texting at 12:30 at night. Hey, can I book my lawn in? I'm just like, what is going on? Like, really? And as I said to him, I'm like, you don't need to answer that now, and don't answer that now. People are in such a connected, in touch society now that they just want to be able to message you when they think of it. And they don't think, hey, it's 12:30 at night. They might think, hey, I'm awake, I've just got home from work, I do this, all this needs to be done, I'll just message now while I think about it. We have quite a few customers that have dementia, so it'll be nothing for them to call at 3 a.m. to talk about their lawn. So we've got them going to the 1300 number. So the benefit of that is it's probably taken about 70% of the calls away from Dan. We're trying to educate the customers, but you've got the ones that will still only message him or talk to him, and that kind of aspect. So we're trying to get there slowly. The older demographic are really liking having the same person in the office they can have a chat to about booking their lawn in, and then talk about what's happening in the mother's ducks this week. And, they went shopping. And for some of these older people, as Dan says, it's their only contact. They're booking call in the office, and then someone comes to mow their lawn, and that might be the only person they've seen for 2 weeks. So it's a bit of a balance between trying to be productive and on time, but also providing, level of customer service as well.
Well, no, when you're solo and you've got a customer that needs a 10-minute chat every time you visit them, or on the phone in between as well, you start mentally doing the maths and going, all right, that customer's gone up. And when I first did this, it was a $40 job up to a $50 job.
Yeah.
Now it might be more like a $100 job and bumping it up to 110 or something. But you start going, okay, if I've got to spend a lot of time with this customer outside of doing the work, then it's going to have a dollar value on it.
Yeah, you have to. And as sad as that sounds, like, you have a business to run, and people don't realize the costs in running a business. Like, you see them on, community groups, or when everyone's like, hey, anyone come do my yard? And, the last guy tried to charge me like $70 an hour. That's ridiculous. But it's not a wage of that,
That's
the
right.
workers' compensation in premiums alone is ridiculous, like.
I think that's almost doubled in the last couple of years.
Oh, definitely. Ours has. As I said to the staff, like, you're looking, you look at sometimes a business with 4 or 5 crews, you're paying $30,000 a year in workers' compensation before they even go and make any money for the day. Like, and it's trying to get to the customers. It's not just us showing up the lawnmower. You've got to pay your vehicle costs. Fuel's always increasing. Insurances are doubling. It's if you want a professional service with a professional job, you need to factor all of that in. So
So I guess the backside of that is that when you're solo, you just sit there doing a mental arithmetic in your head, going, this person's costing me more than what they're worth. And if you actually do that arithmetic, because sometimes I haven't done it, but when I've done that, I've gone, all right, $80 job. No, this is not making money. What do I need to be making money? And as a solo person, you're going to be aiming for around 30% profit margin if you know your numbers.
Yes. Yeah.
When you get to your size, it's harder to run at that margin. It's harder to run a business successfully and keep customers happy at the 30% margin, because you've got the overheads of running the admin team and managing the apprentice who's not working as efficiently as Dan is. And
exactly. Yeah. It's definitely challenging. And I think sometimes as you grow bigger, your margin does go down a little bit. And that's where you need to start looking at doing the bigger jobs, or making sure you're more efficient, putting in systems that make you efficient, and so you can go. Everyone wants to try to aim for that margin of 30%, but realistically, when you're bigger, you're looking probably more closer to 25, if you want to be honest, because the wages and the workers' compensation, like, you might have your own income protection for yourself if you're a sole trader, but workers' compensation insurance, they turn around and put their hand out for 5% of everything, even though we've never had a workplace insurance, that sort of stuff. And there's costs that you can't control. So you really do need to be able to factor in and make sure you know your numbers and you look at it. And we still have customers that, they've been around for a long time. They've been with Dan for a long time. They knew him from before. They're well underpriced. And I know that, but for the sake that, they've been there for a long time, there'll be someone that Dan himself will go and do just to service them, if that makes sense, because he does it out of the goodness of his heart, and he does it because he knows that, this person can't afford any more than that $60 she's paying, even though for to send the crews there, it'd be a $90 job. So he'll just go and do it. And that's his way of giving back. Or, he does things on the side that I didn't even realize were happening. A very old man that has gone into a nursing home now, but Bill rang me up and he said, oh, can you tell Dan he doesn't need to come and put the green bins out for me this week, love, because my son did it when he come over, and it's not on Dan's list. And he said, oh no, he just pops around every Tuesday and drags them out for me, so he knows I can't lift them. So he still does stuff like that, which, if I looked at it from that point of view, I'm like, that half an hour is just taking that. But you've got to give back as well into the community, and we're big believers in giving back into the local community and supporting the people that support us. And so although you do need to have your look at your figures and your numbers and your money and stuff, it can't only ever be about that.
I've mentioned a few times I'm a Christian, and I look at it from the point of view of going, you know what? If I give a tithe or an offering to the church, it's going to support something I see as valuable. But more and more, I look at what I do, and I'm in touch with people who need help more than the pastor or the church needs the money. And it's like, okay, if I give back to the community in ways where I see people that are in need every day, then it makes so much more sense. And yeah, it's a very worthwhile place to be. We are the hands and the feet. We see the people that are in need more than anyone does.
Yeah, exactly. And we are very big believers in karma, in the fact that what you give, you get back.
Yeah.
So it is going that extra bit. It is helping it. It is, like I'll have a call from Dan or the crews or anyone and say, oh, I haven't seen, Mary for ages. She hasn't come out when we go to do a lawn. Can you please get someone? Can you ring and check on her? Can you ring the daughter? Can you
do a welfare check?
Do a welfare check. It's not just about showing up and mowing a lawn. It's our crews become, and even though we are fairly big, the customers know all of our people because they rotate through them. They know the people that come to their yard. Certain crews will do certain jobs, but they get to know, they know the people. They know that, oh, Mary should be there, or something doesn't look right at her house. Can we ring and check on her? Or, they'll say, oh, I just spent 10 minutes extra because she was struggling to pick this up and we just moved it and stuff. So it swings and roundabouts in that way. But at the end of the day, if they can feel good about themselves after the job and they can see the difference they're making, especially to our elderly clientele or some of our NDIS customers are more infirm, like they can see that what they've done has really helped them for the day, or they've done something just a little bit extra. And
and this is, touching on that 30%, this is where we've got flexibility to do that and to show compassion and kindness to customers and people who might not even be customers. But when you start looking at the bigger businesses in our industry, and by all means, you are getting larger in terms of the businesses I've interviewed, but the larger businesses run multiple crews. They put in government tenders, and they have included in all of their costs their admin costs. So when they put a tender in, they are literally aiming for around the 10% margin, and they run on a very low margin with low skilled employees, aimed at doing large government and corporate jobs rather than doing residential work. And they don't prize residential work because it's really hard to keep a residential customer happy when you've got low margins, low skilled employees, and you're in and out of a 10-minute, half-hour job. So they focus on a completely different thing, and it's understandable. But for us to aim for that 25-30% margin, working with residential jobs, it's still a juggling act as you get to the size you are, where your admin costs become a substantial factor. You're paying an admin person full time, you're doing a lot of the admin yourself, and you don't get the chance to be on the tools. When you're talking about Dan being on the tools and juggling being on the tools as well as taking all of the phone calls, that's, like you say, that is a mental health challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And admin costs, we're always mindful of the fact, and Dan's very mindful of the fact. He's like, admin doesn't make us money, and it really doesn't, but it's a cost. If it can keep, admin's definitely valued and it's worth it, but you can't really factor it into your residential lawn mow. You can't say, oh, sorry, Mary, I've got to put an extra $5 on your lawn because you rang once last week and we've had to send you that invoice 3 times, and then we've had to call you because you forgot to pay it. And, as Mike Andy's is another one with this. He said, every time you have to contact that customer for something, your profit off that customer has gone down because you've just invented more time and labor in it. So admin is definitely a challenge, but it's something you can't not have when you start having employees and crew, unless you are that sole trader that then gets yourself completely off the tools. But I think if you're completely off the tools, you're out of touch with your customers, you're out of touch with, what's going on in the business and what's needed and how long things are taking. And, like we've tried to drag Dan off the tools many, many times. He will spend hours doing admin. Our accountants are like, hey, dude, you really need to spend some more time off the tools and wandering around. But as he says, like, he's still, if he's off the tools completely and he's not out and about, he's out of touch with what's going on with the business. He's out of touch with what's going on with the clients, especially the bigger jobs. He likes to go and definitely, if he's not on that job himself, set the boys up, make sure they understand what's expected, because clients always have an expectation here. We've quoted somewhere around here, and it's trying to, make it like you'll go out and say, oh, we'll quote, take this hedge back. And, we'll discuss with them in person and say, this much. And we've done 30 centimeters and get there and they're thinking you're going to take a meter off and take all the way to the, like, you know, it's definitely melding that. So I think you still need to be, as a business owner, involved with your customers. You definitely need to be involved in motivating your staff, and you need to be out there so you can still keep a grip on what's happening within the business, within the customers, within the scape of, you know, the business.
In the early days, I was running, and from the very start of my business, I was running a spreadsheet and iCalendar.
Yes.
And so I would go into my spreadsheet, I'd have my list of customers, I'd mark off when I mowed the lawn with the date and the price and all those various factors in the spreadsheet so I could actually keep a track of what I needed to about that customer. And then iCalendar would have the event for mowing on that particular day at that particular time. And then after I'd mowed, if I was diligent, I would invoice the same day. And then I would reschedule to mow again in 2 weeks or whatever the case was with that customer. Back then I even had a few jobs that were once every 3 weeks. Don't say that out loud. I don't want everyone to know.
We still have some of those, but yeah.
Yeah, but that, you know, the 3 week mows are the killers in Australia. They're just, yeah. Anyway, what I'm getting at is at some stage I started thinking there's no software to do this. Maybe I should try and develop something or get a developer to work on something. And then I heard of this software called Jobber, and I was like, oh, it works in Canada. Will it work in Australia? No. And that was before it actually came to Australia.
Yeah.
I was interested, but I was like, nah, what a waste of time. And then Mowing and Growing started representing Jobber in Australia, and LMCA became a thing, and a lot of other people started talking about this software or apps called CRMs. All the things we've just been talking about, let's wrap that up into something that looks productive.
Yeah.
I've done an interview with ServiceMate. I still don't use a CRM in my business, so I'm going to plead ignorance when it comes to how functional ServiceMate is or any of the CRMs are. I do have some understanding though. So you've done more investigation into this. You've got a bigger business than me, and the need to go from Dan's paper diary to something functional.
Look, Gary, if I build for the amount of hours I've spent investigating CRM softwares, like it would be in the hundreds of hours. I had spreadsheets with the benefits of everyone. I've trialed nearly everything under the sun that you can find in Australia. I've trialed a lot of American softwares, which is really great, but then it turns around and you're like, oh, hang on, I can't, it won't talk to my Australian accounting software. I can't take payments online. I can't do, you know, this sort of stuff. So I tried Jobber as well, especially I think after I'd seen them with Mowing and Growing, and Dan's like, oh, hey, I saw this somewhere, try this one. Or he'd shoot me a thing, try this one. And again, if I had unlimited time, unlimited funds, I'd probably get someone to try to develop something that was specific for our business, because we have such unique needs in the fact that we do residential, but we do commercial. We have a commercial division. We do a lot of stratas. Some require 22 services, some require 18, some are on 26, you know, some are once every 10 weeks, some are, you know, the stratas dictate what they need for their services and, you know, what the committee has available. We have some bigger contracts that are weekly jobs. We have, you know, the residentials that range between 2 weeks in summer to some of them are 6 weeks in winter because it's buffalo and that grass just doesn't grow and the customer won't pay for less. And, you know, we have a cleaning division that works in the stratas or the windows. We, you know, so it's really quite challenging. And a lot of the softwares that would work specifically fantastic just for lawn mow won't work when you try to add the stratas in and you try to add the cleaning in or you try to add this billing or this different billing rate. So I've been tearing my hair out repeatedly, going from there. And this was, you know, after we come from the paper diary. So we went there and it kept saying to Dan, we can't keep managing on this diary. You take this diary with you every day in the car. You know, it's off with the ute. I can't make bookings because I don't know what you've got there. I'm trying to schedule your work. I'm trying to invoice. So I'd have to wait till he'd come home at night with his A4 paper diary and go through and he'd highlight the ones he's collected the payments for and he'd, you know, circle the ones that need to be rebooked in 2 weeks, and then he'd flick to 2 weeks and rebook these ones, and then, you know, I'd have a spreadsheet that the invoices would be on and trying to pay it. It wasn't working. And when we first started looking at things, I think back in 2017, we went with ServiceMate because that was the first Australian one, and that was really good for what we needed at the time. Like it Dan, again, really didn't use it for scheduling. He just wanted to use it for the things that I really loved about it at that point was, your email thread, you could put it in. It had the whole thread with text messages, invoices, quotes, everything. The customer relation management side of that one was great. The big downfall for us at that point, though, and I don't know if it's been fixed because I can't go back once I've moved forward, if that makes sense, because you're exporting databases, importing them, paying different money, doing whatever. We kind of outgrew it because, as I said, we'd put on those 2 new staff members. They had an Android phone. I had an Android phone. That ServiceMate wasn't working on anything other than Dan's iPhone and the computer. And it got too hard. I couldn't swap staff members between crews. The reoccurring jobs were becoming ridiculous because I was being charged for every reoccurring job. And, I could see how, and I have plumber friends and electrician friends, and they use it and it's great and works so well for them. And it really looks like a good platform for what they're doing. Just wasn't working for us.
I think those 2 biggest issues that you raised that you couldn't get past is iPhone only and the recurring jobs billing, and I think they're working to address both of those. So I've seen an update where they said that you can run ServiceMate Lite on an Android phone, so your employees can run everything they need from ServiceMate Lite on their own phone without having to have an iPhone. And I think they're looking at a new billing option for recurring business.
Yeah, okay. It's good. And I think for the target market they're looking at, that would be beneficial. And I was forever messaging them going, hey, this, and it's just like, no plans for Android, no plans for this, no plans for that. And it just got to the point where I'm like, I really like this software. I spent a lot of time customizing it. It has great potential, but it's just not working in that respect. Too many crews, too many users. It just has to sort of look for something else.
So the 2 biggest complaints outside of that for ServiceMate, I don't want to have a go at them. I like them, but
I like them too. But we outgrew it.
The critique is that scheduling is met with a couple of issues in ServiceMate in terms of route density. They don't have anything that works on route density.
Yes, that was a thing as well. We could put the schedules in, but I don't believe at the time. And as I said, I may be a bit incorrect. It was 7 years ago with them. They couldn't show me what a route would look at or drive time or anything back then. I don't know if that's fixed. And that's a big thing with a business our size as well when you're running with so many staff and crews.
Yeah, the other side of that is that they did allow for GPS logging. So when your employee turns up to the site, it would start the clock, and when they leave the site, it would end the clock. But I've heard numerous people say, okay, what if I've got 3 properties beside each other? Can it differentiate? And the answer is no. So it's one job.
Yeah, there was
or you manually do it.
Yeah. So as I said, it was good, and I could see how it's really beneficial for a sole trader that doesn't have that many recurring jobs, or, as I said, a plumber friend of ours uses it, an electrician guy that comes to our work uses it, and, it's so great. He can send the invoice from his phone, that he can pay on his phone, he can do whatever right at the time, and it works really good. So it's definitely got a huge amount of potential. But sadly for us, we really just outgrew it. We were doing too many jobs, we were trying to run too many crews. Our scheduling was just everywhere, like it really wasn't working. So
the other thing I think with ServiceMate there, and we'll move on from ServiceMate, I think they're worthwhile, but let's point out this one other issue. For a lot of people, they come across as really clunky because it's easier to get a ServiceMate partner to set it up and get it running effectively than it is to actually do it yourself. If you kind of give yourself a bit of credit and say, okay, I'm pretty good with computers and technology, you could probably do it all yourself, but it's not straightforward. It is like getting into the back end of software and starting to play with the database behind it and the APIs is the word I'm looking for. So there's a lot of plugins you can run with ServiceMate, but they're not native to ServiceMate. You've got to then run the APIs and then set up more things in the background. So
and then you've got to subscribe to some of those apps to get them to run in ServiceMate and pay their fee as well, I found, or that was the case back then. So
a lot of them you probably already pay for. So if you've got your accounting package, there's probably an API that allows the accounting package to talk to ServiceMate.
Yeah. I remember with ServiceMate back then, simple things like multi-sites, I think it might have been to have, for real estate, had different sites, it was an extra $3 in this app or this app. Like to put in all the features we added, it was actually adding up.
Yeah.
with the little
It
bits and pieces on top of that.
costs quite a bit by the time
Costs
you
quite
do
a
all
bit.
it.
So you start off thinking, oh, it's not that much. But then by the time you add in the SMS fees and this and this and this, and as I said, ServiceMate was good. I didn't use a
Yeah.
partner to set it up because I'm quite tech savvy. So I'd go into the back end of it and work all that kind of stuff ourselves. But
Yep.
it was still quite clunky back then. I
Yeah.
haven't looked at it in a couple of years, but
Yep.
just the layout of it was a little bit clunky. The tags on the jobs, it was just, yeah. So it has potential to be really good, especially
Yes.
for, people in different industries. But I think with a lot of the softwares, we're really still struggling to find something that is really specific to our industry, like fertilizing, weeding, spraying, chemical,
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
And I think the ones that
Specific.
are exceptional, like Mike Andy's one, it's what do you say it was something like $350 to $400 a month.
That's for his performance for profit. If you're looking at his service autopilot, that was a lot more expensive for us.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yep. So yeah, it all adds up then, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was going to use a version of his Lawn Pro, the one he first started off, I think it was Lawn Pro, that he first started off using, which was really good, but doesn't integrate with Xero or MyOb, so you'd have to change everything to QuickBooks, and then it wouldn't take online Australian payments. But it was really good in the fact that, routing and seasonal schedules and really easy to use, and because you've got to think like your employees have a whole range. I mean, definitely they're younger, so they're more tech savvy. Dan's still a bit technologically challenged because he's still paper books, diaries, still prints out our run sheets, even though they're electronic, because he likes to have that copy. So, if you're in somewhere where there's a bad service area, trying to learn different softwares was really quite hard. And every time you introduce a change and try to train staff and change something, it does. It's quite complex. So, I did look at the service autopilot. Again, the US conversion to Australian dollars was a big thing as well. And just the support for me, I actually need really good support with what we do because I have lots of questions, lots of custom things that need to go up. And again, time difference times, emailing back. That was a big thing with us. So I did sort of look and wander in there. Again, if he ever brings out Australian versions, I'd probably be interested to have a bit of a look.
Yeah.
But it's just not something in our realm at the moment.
In the last 10 minutes or so, we've touched on a lot of things that a CRM needs to do or that they don't do well. And you've had experience with a number of CRMs there.
Yes.
One of the guys I've been chatting to recently has very black and white view on a CRM needs to cover the full spectrum of customer relationships. So everything from lead management to converting the lead to a quote to a job through to invoicing and scheduling and the whole lot. I would say that a CRM doesn't have to do everything in order for you to call it customer relationship software, but it still needs to be adequate, right?
Yeah. So when we started to outgrow ServiceMate, and I started looking around for other softwares and started looking into Jobber and Tradeify, and I started looking into Gorilla Desk, and you name it, I've looked at it. I've trialed it. I've tried to run with it. I've done demos. I've sat through multiple Zoom demonstrations, and we went to another software that promised the world. It was a $2,500 onboarding fee, but for this, they'd input all our databases, and they had that full CRM thing. They had lead generation and pipelines and quoting and job tagging and invoicing and, SMS, and you could customize everything under the sun and you could do whatever. So we thought, great, this is what we really need. And it was one of the worst mistakes of my life because I realized really quickly they had no understanding of our industry, even though they promised me they did. They promised things like, if you put the GPS in the vehicles, it'll auto check in and out with the geofencing once you get to the properties and stuff. No, that was never a thing. So I'd spend all this extra money on these GPS systems that only work with their software, go in their vehicles, and, it would be a great software for like a builder or a pool builder or someone that has these complex jobs that get invoiced in stages and that sort of stuff. But the support was beyond shocking. Like their so-called imports, their database, they tripled it in. I had to go through it. It took me 3 days to fix it up on their input. They lost all the job histories. The jobs weren't priced. Nothing was done. Like it was almost too big and too complex for what we need. So I think you do need a customer management software that has some basic things. Like, for us, and the current one I use at the moment, which is what it doesn't have all the things, but there's the support is there and they keep adding things all the time. But for me, in a customer management software, I like to be able to have a customer history where you can keep a record of text messages in or out or communications with the customer, you know, from the file where you can go in and message them from them and go there. I'd love to be able to see, you know, invoices paid or outstanding, get a quick the job. I'd love to be able to put flags on there that, you know, the system flags up and says, hang on, this job was only done 3 days ago. What are you doing? Or do you know what I mean? Like it's picked it up. Hang on, we've done this. Which Lawn Pro did. It would say, hang on, are you sure you want to do this? This job was only done 3 days ago, or it's next due in 9 days. But again, it didn't have the invoicing. Quoting. I'd love to be able to have things that are all done in. It depends. For our lead generation and management, we have a spreadsheet, basically. We know where the leads come from and where they go in. I use some old-fashioned things like categorize and tag in the email, adding reminders to calendars for following up, using our online software of Xero with our current software. Yes, a system that has it all in one is great, but if they try to be too complex, I think they lose the most essential things like the scheduling, the job management for the clients or whatever else, because it's too big and it costs them too much to add all this stuff in. So their support fees go through the roof. It becomes unachievable. Then they need to get bigger businesses in different industries to, you know, support their thing, and they just lose focus of where it's gone, which is what I think happened with the previous software. And I was just tearing my hair out, but we were so locked into there that we just couldn't go anywhere. We'd paid all this money to set up. We were paying, you know, huge monthly fees every month. The support was crappy. And then it just started not coping with the amount of recurring and jobs, and it was dropping them just off the database. Runs were just disappearing. Customers would ring up and say, you haven't been to see me in 5 weeks. So we're like, what do you mean? We'd look in there and their booking had gone. Just,
Oh, no.
it was terrible. Like it just really, it did a lot of damage over the time. And I was actually in America when all this was happening as well, just to make it all better. And I kept saying to Chloe, why isn't this job? She's like, it's not there. I swear I booked it. I swear I did this. And then we realized that this is exactly what was happening. And of course the company wasn't interested in helping to fix anything, do anything, whatever else. So I'm just like, well, I'm really going to need to go somewhere else now. And that's when I really seriously were looking at Lawn Pro and Jobber. But again, support in Canada wasn't helping me. I'd learned the hard way that if something is wrong with the amount of jobs we have scheduled every week, I need someone that can answer my call that day, answer my email, fix something quickly.
Efficiency is the thing that rules a business and the decisions you make as a small business owner. Right Mowers give you the options in their product lineup to match efficiency with size, fuel usage, and the type of jobs you want to target, from catching to mulching or side discharge, from roadside verges to acreages, and manicured lawns to 6 feet tall and super long. I've been using the Right Stander I 42-inch with a Catch Pro for manicured areas and the Stander ZK61 to maximise productivity for large open acreage mowing. If you need to replace your push mower, try the 32-inch Stander B. If you have more open access to residential properties, there's a 42 through 48-inch option that suits you. And if you want to enter the acreage market, the 52, 61 and 72-inch machines have choices in engine size and model type to suit the work you want it to do. Right Standards go the distance, saving you time and money season after season.
I realise how critical this is, and you'll laugh, when I bought Office 365, because it was no longer effective to have a permanent copy of Microsoft Office. And the login for Office 365 initially was through the internet. It wouldn't let you log in manually offline or anything like that. And I had my customer database in my spreadsheet, and my internet went down and I couldn't look at my spreadsheet. And it's like, I can't work because I don't know what jobs I've got.
I know. Yeah, we don't realise how the back-end systems can actually make or break a business. In the fact, if you can't access something as simple as your spreadsheet, you're in trouble if you don't know what needs doing or where it's up to. CRMs and customer management and software is huge in this industry, and finding something that actually really works is such a challenge. And if you don't have the right system for your business, it's just not going to work. So we, in the end, have swapped to a different software, which is SortScape, and we find that really well. My main reasons for that was I'd ran into Leo, who is Fox Mowing. So he's like the head franchisees for New South Wales. And we were
tell him to come and do an interview with me when you talk to him.
I will. Okay. He's a great guy. Like, honestly, he was telling me, he'd left gyms to go and start this business with another guy, and they started Fox, and it was a challenge, and how he grew, and, happy to share information. And I'm like, wow, this is not normal. Like, no, more than happy to share information, doing whatever. And we got chatting about scheduling and software. And he said, well, I use SortScape. And I'm like, SortScape? I looked at them before and I didn't really think they were. And he's like, no, I use it. He said, I have in-house crews and manage all my franchises through it. And I'm like, wow, okay, if someone that has this many franchises and this many in-house crews can manage off this thing, I need to take another look at it. Yeah. So I did. And that's where we kind of ended up from there. And it's still, like, I hadn't really heard of it much before then. And I'd say it's still sort of in its infancy stages, in the fact that it is still growing and developing. But the best things about it is Bill and Chris, the guys that run SortScape. I'm sure I feel like they should have blocked my email by now, the amount of emails I send them every day. But no, straight away within, like half an hour, Bill's messaging me back or Chris is messaging me back. Oh, yep, let's try this. I've enabled this feature. I put a ticket in. They've got the online Autobot. So it doesn't have all the fancy bells and whistles that a lot of the other ones have, but they're coming. So when we first came on board, you could just do your basic invoicing and it integrated for Xero. Now the guys are developing their quoting software, which is being released through there. I've got early access to it with another one of my colleagues because we do some training and stuff. So, I'm working on the quoting system, and they test it out to say this. And this has only been, I started using it in Jan 24. So in the 15 months pretty much since we've been banging on about quoting, the guys are releasing these features. I said to them, guys, one text message limit of however many characters doesn't work for me, because sometimes I need to send long things or chase an invoice. Straight away it was enabled, like an hour later. Yep, we've enabled this feature. Awesome. They add tickets and then it's sent through. So the software and where the capacity of where it's going to go, I think, is the best thing in ours. It will tell me, drive times and route times. You can so I can plan my route of the day and I'll say, hang on, it's actually more effective if you move this job around here and do this drive time, that hour of the day. But sometimes we'll say, well, hang on, no, this is going to be a left-hand side and they're only home at 3. So we'll just make a couple of little adjustments, but it'll suggest it and say, hey, if you redo this, you might save an hour and 1 minute drive time, or you might do this. So that's really effective for us as well. It's got crew estimation time. So your job will do man hours. So if I say, okay, one person man hour to do this job should be 1 hour. If I add 2 crews, it'll say half an hour. Or if I put 3 on the crew, it'll say 20 minutes. Like, it actually calculates based on how many people you put in the crew. You can charge by the hour or the fixed price. Obviously, there's still a few things I'd love for them to be able to develop, and I'm forever sending them suggestions. But I find it has been really helpful for us in the fact it's really easy to use. The app works on our phone, iPhone, Android. It works offline if your internet drops out. It works. Our admin runs it from the computer, the main office. It allows us to put a task list in, general notes for each job that just flashes up. The boys can actually tick off their checklists, or the crews as they do a job, put photos up. Awesome. They can check in and out. So we have 3 properties in a row. They can check in and out to 3 properties right next door to each other, and it's not confused with the geofencing. It's,
yep.
Like, they can add the photos. So it really helps us because I can see, what time was spent there. They can add notes in. They can add issues in. They can say, required extra bulk is this visit. So I know to charge that. The admin from the back end can charge it. That's where we're at the moment. And we're actually really pleased with the fact that I have done that. And as I said, if it wasn't for SortScape, my other one probably would have been looking into a service autopilot, which is my candies, but I just can't get over the fact that it's expensive. It doesn't integrate with Australian stuff.
Or getting something custom made.
Well, yes, getting something custom made, but apparently Jim's job spent like $1 million or $10 million trying to develop his app software, which doesn't work well either. By the way, I've tried that. It's fine for a sole trader. You can't have multiple, So there's definitely things that need to go, but I think SortScape for us has been a game changer.
Now, one of the things you said that stood out is that it's easy to use. Yes. And I think that is absolutely critical for anything at the moment. If you have something that is complicated, and we were talking before about ServiceMate being a little bit clunky in terms of all of the functionality that's available, but it's not easy to find how to set things up. That means that you need somebody else who understands it to help you set it up almost, or you do, one way or the other. So if you can make something easy to use, you're more likely to use it as a business owner, and your employees are more likely to work with it and use it effectively. You did raise one thing that's really important, though, the geofencing on properties that are right beside each other. On a practical note, I've formed the opinion that it is more efficient to mow property 1 completely, mow, whip, blow, then start property 2, rather than going, all right, one guy's on the mower, one guy's on the whip snipper, another guy's on the ride-on mower or whatever it is that you've got in the crew. Go, get all 3 properties done and then log them.
No, we do 1, 2, 3. Like you finish everything at that property and you move on to the next, because otherwise you're backtracking.
It's more efficient.
And as I said, we always generally work in a 2 or a 3-man crew, which I know is very controversial in our industry. People will be like, no 2-man crews. No, must only have 1. But there's benefits in the fact that you've got a double set of eyes. They're double checking each other's work. Yes. They're walking around, The first one starts the whip, the second one starts the mower, they go around, the whip's usually finished, blows off, oh, hey, mate, you missed this bit, packing the tools in the truck. So as long as they're both trained in how it works, they'll generally finish at the same time. And our job time's not always exactly half. It's often maybe 2/3 or less, but you work it in. And you're not running, if you have 2 one-man crews, you're only getting half the work done in the day, because you can get, officially the double, and they get demotivated by themselves. The jobs take longer. No one's, come on, let's go, let's get through, we've got this. They're not checking. So there's pros and cons to every way to do it. But
I think there's a couple of issues that come up there. So one of them being, if you're logging property 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row, but it's a strata, then I would generally say log that as one property rather than multiple properties where it's strata. But that's different.
Yeah. So we have some stratas where we do the strata, but also residents have their own little lawns that are done in there.
Yeah.
So, in the timer you check in and you actually press the button to start it, so it's counting. And then you can also check in at the next bit on there and stop it, so it can be running simultaneously out.
Yeah, okay.
And as I said to them, it's mainly done so that we have record of when they're on site, but it's not, as I said to the guys, like, I don't pick about every minute, but it's making sure primarily that I'm allocating the right amount of time for the job and that we're charging the customer the right amount of money. Because if, this launch should generally take 30 minutes for 2 guys, and that's being generous, and it's starting to take 40 every time, or this reason it takes 45, what's going on? Oh, the lady asked me to do this and this and this. So you need to know how much extra to charge for that, or whether you need to adjust your timing and your pricing, because if something's changed within the property, that big sand pit's now being turned into a grass area, they got rid of the deck and there's more grass, you need to know how much time is being spent there to ensure that you're charging properly and allocating the guys enough time, because if the crews are stressed and you're like, okay, you're only allowed 30 minutes for that job, but I know it's going to take us 45, they're going to miss things, you're going to get complaints, things are going to be not as good. So the job check-in and outs are really effective. So with SortScape, you can do it in 2 ways. When it comes to the timesheets at the end of the week, you can have it so it'll show the check-in and out for each job that the crew's been on, but I have ours different so that the crew have to put their start, finish time, break time, and notes, driver for the day, crew leader for the day. I worked past 2:45 because, we did overtime at this job, or, so it actually comes to notes that export for me, and then I look at the jobs individually when we're billing them each day to go through for the time spent, and it estimates also what the job should be worth based on the crew time that was allocated at the job. So it should be saying, oh, hang on, if you've set me to charge $77 per hour for 1 crew, 88, or whatever it is the business has set for the type of work, it'll say, well, 2 people should be costing this, you're only charging this. Like, it's highlighting where
so
we're
it helps you to identify the efficiencies.
Definitely.
And I think that's really what's the right word? It's up to the individual's perspective in terms of whether they think a one-person ute, van, whatever, is more efficient than having 2 people out there.
Yeah.
If you are solo and you own the business, sure, one person on their own is more efficient. But when you start looking at growing a business, it is not efficient to grow a business with a bunch of solo guys running around doing work, and you've touched that. it's not necessarily efficient to have two people on the same job at the same time, but if you've got 5 vehicles with one person in each vehicle running around and you've got all that drive time with 5 vehicles running around compared to if you cut that down to, say, 3 vehicles, the same amount of people running around doing it, then you're reducing the wear and tear on vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, you might not get the perfect efficiency, but you allow for business growth by doing that.
And you're not having those extra vehicles sitting there. You're not paying extra rego, extra insurance, extra sets of equipment, for the same thing. And it depends on your workplace dynamic. Like, we have a lot of younger staff, apprentices, and a lot of, in their early 20s kind of stuff. And when you're looking at the big thing with that generation below us these days is workplace culture. And they're always talking about workplace culture and workplace family and whatever else. That generation generally don't want to be by themselves every day. They want the camaraderie of having someone they can banter with in the ute, someone they can eat lunch with, chatting back and forth and discussing their day and talking about what happened at the gym last night and, all that kind of stuff. They like that mix of swapping staff around so that the teams are fresh. They just wouldn't, I don't really feel like they would cope being in a ute all day, every day by
on
themselves.
Their own.
Yeah, no. Whereas someone that's, our age or a bit older might happily be, just happy to go off and do whatever by his own. Yeah. I mowed Van Grove Mountain football fields for like a year straight, and every Saturday I'd hook the ride up on, take my extra fuel cans out, and I'd sit there with my audiobook on and mow 3 football fields, and it'll take me 8.5 hours on the ride on, and I was happy doing that by myself. But you know what I mean? That was a one-off thing. But all day, every day, like 5 days a week, I'd probably be quite.
And I think when you're working with a lot of people, you're going to run into motivational issues and, like you said, workplace culture. I think it's one thing to set the culture for your company and say this is what we are striving to attain, but within the teams you have team culture, and so you get micro cultures and people who are difficult to work with can really upset a culture.
That's definitely right. So a big thing is making sure that you have the right mix of people, because if you have, someone that just likes to stir the pot and pick on everyone, and, you've really got to pick your personalities. And a lot of our crew being younger, as I said, they have very different, distinct personalities. So you need to know who works well together, who can't work well together. But it's also about developing those guys that are more in the team leader role to be able to train them and give them the skills to work with everyone and to manage the people under them, because you can't just go, well, I'm not going to work with that person ever because I just don't like them, or their hairstyle annoys me, or whatever other excuses you hear over the years, they talk too much, or they won't shut up, or they want to go to the bathroom, or, it is primarily getting that. And I think, we've had issues over the years where we've had staff that have like stirring the pot and like causing problems and don't want to work with each other, and they just really get off on upsetting the workplace environment. They'll, did you hear what this one person said about you behind your back? And, it's about finding the right staff mix that fit in and saying from the start, this is what we're trying to build, this is how we're trying to go. We try to reward you for your work, but we want something back as well. Like, you really need, this is your workplace and you need to make it good for you. And, things that we do, like Dan has a fridge in our workshop and he fills it with soft drinks every week and water. And, if they were buying it every day, it'd probably be about $200 worth of drinks a week. But that works well for the staff because they have ice blocks and they have Powerade and they have the latte coffee shakers and stuff. And that's a little thing we said, and we don't have to do this, but we do this so that you've got, that sort of stuff. So.
Yeah, and I've seen it time and time again when I've talked about my experience here where I had an employee who was making sure he got as many hours paid as he could in a day. So if I was and it was just him and myself, if I was working really hard, he would slow down. And you will find within teams like you've got that you will always have somebody who wants to drag the chain, or somebody who's working really hard and diligently. And
and it's especially when it comes to the permanents as well, because then they go into sort of overtime, and you'll have people saying, this person just wants the overtime all the time. That's why they're getting slower every day and it's going through. And then you need to look at things such as introducing like HR, like time in lieu instead of overtime. But this is where I think, performance for profit really is going to come into it, and it's going to be a way forward with our sort of businesses in the future, because people that have worked really hard and they skill up, they're only going to get so much per hour, and you're going to say, well, look, I'm only charging this much per lawn. We can't really charge, $200 to be able to give you a huge performance bonus. So it's about finding ways to motivate them and looking into it. But it should have a system in place where people that work hard get the rewarded, and the ones that suck off don't get rewarded. They get the bare minimum, and it comes to show that. And then you can start either micromanaging them by, trying to encourage or improve their workplace performance. But if they're just not going the same destination as you, they need to get off the bus. Like, there comes a point where you can't come along, and you need to find someone else that wants to be sort of on the journey and build what you were thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's one of the things I talked about recently. Did an interview with a lady that runs a HR firm, and talking about how she handles situations like this, because her firm is dealing with businesses your size and my size, helping people get their employee practices in place, get their company culture working well, making sure that they're doing the right thing to treat their employees well, but also having fair expectations on them.
Yeah, and it is meeting in the middle, and having conversations and stuff with them. So you say to the guys, you're supposed to start at 6:45. You're rocking up at 10 to 7, 5 to 7 every day, but putting your timesheet in at 6:45. But then you're leaving at 3:05 and putting your finish at 3:15. Doesn't work both ways. So you need to have clear expectations, but they need to understand why, how it works, and feel that they're both meeting somewhere in the middle. But we have a HR consultant that works with us in that respect, and if I need things checked or whatever, I send it through to her and she looks at it, because it's just managing people is a whole it's a whole specialist area, especially in sort of industry. And our award doesn't allow for rain days like the Builders Award does. We get slammed in so many different areas with that trying to find this magic thing that works in the middle. What do you do? And, as you know, in March, April, sometimes you have weeks of rain and you've got all these staff sort of sitting around, and you get them doing what you can, but there's only so many times they can sharpen their equipment, clean out their utes, do whatever. And I'm talking about the days that it's absolutely torrential and it's flooding, and there's no way you can possibly do anything in that day.
Yeah,
so,
that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've covered some pretty good topics, and we're heading close to an hour and a half on this interview. There's a couple of things I still wanted to touch on, but I think we've covered the CRM and looking after employees pretty well. One of the things I want to touch on, so going back to your husband, Dan, I know we had a bit of a joke before the interview about not confusing him with Daniel Smith.
He's actually his full name is Daniel Smith, so it's quite hilarious when you're in the LMCA group and you see Dan Smith and Dan Smith comment, and I'm just like, oh.
And and Daniel Smith that we're referring to, other than your husband, was in Newcastle before he moved up to Queensland.
Oh, there we go. It seems to be a common name down here on the coast. I know of at least two others.
Well, Smith's a fairly common surname. Daniel's a fairly common first name.
Dan jokes and says, like, every mole man must be called Daniel Smith. He's like, it's just standard. I've seen ones in Sydney called Daniel Smith. I've seen, see them comment on things. Oh, okay. And yeah, no.
Yep. We should do a roll call on LMCA. How many Daniel Smiths are here?
Yes, it seems to be quite common in the mole man industry. So
yeah, one of the things that I get requested from listeners is to talk about equipment more.
Yep.
And I can talk about my equipment all the time, but people get sick of listening to me. So for you probably get the opportunity to have equipment that is suited to doing different types of customers. So one rig will be going out to do residential jobs, another one might be going out to do acreage, another one out to do commercial. Some equipment's just going to be standard across the board, like a standard straight shaft whippersnipper, maybe a multi-tool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, do you run vans? Do you run utes with trailers?
We run utes at the moment. We have the 4-door Hilux. We have the two-door Hiluxes. Plus we have the Land Cruiser that, was our car previously, that runs as an extra vehicle around there with a trailer on. And then we have our contractors that run. My father-in-law runs his Commodore with our trailer on the back with the sign writing. So it just depends on how it goes. The utes we have set up so it's always a 2-person crew, 2-person mole lift, 2-person on and off, because in the city it's hard to do trailers, like hard to get in and out. You just don't have space.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you really need to compact that. We've discussed vans, and I think our next one probably will be a van, but the crews tend to fight against it. They're like, oh, it's going to smell bad, and it's going to be, we're going to have these fumes all the time, and we're going to look like we're drug dealers. And, the younger generation just seem to have this thing against white vans. I have no idea what it is.
I had a black van, and my son was not happy when I got a black van. He's like,
No.
Dad, you're never dropping me off to school.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they tend to like the crew utes because it's open. They can chuck the rubbish on the back. They can do whatever. They do come with challenges themselves. My poor son got a fine the other day because the policeman didn't like the fact that our fuel containers were occy strapped through and tied on to the move. And no, apparently that wasn't good enough. It has to have a net over that particular section as well. The net was on there, but had this much unexposed.
Wow.
So I think tradies do get picked on quite a lot in certain things. But yeah, we run the utes with the trailers on. So every ute standard has generally 2 HRU 216 Honda mowers, or we do have the lighter. Often we'll use like not an Azito, a Massport light one, because some of the places we have, they have to carry mowers upstairs and they really only need a light residential. So they're available for them to throw on as well. The second mower always runs on there because if one breaks down or something happens, you're wasting time coming back to the depot to get a second one. Or if it's a particularly big yard, they can grab the second mower and start mowing. So you can have 2 mowing once the whip's done. Yep. We all have the straight steel shaft, and we have the combi tools. We usually have 2 of them running around. We have some handheld hedges, which are quite controversial. We're trying to get rid of them just because of the danger factor in them. Like there's no space to move if they drop it down their legs. So the only people allowed to use them are actually the really highly skilled
hedges,
that are well trained in that. Combi tools with extension poles for our hedging. We have quite a lot of them. Recently, we've been in the battery debate for quite some time. So we originally started using the steel hedger back when it came out in the battery range. Dan really wasn't impressed with it. We had constant multiple issues. The battery didn't last long. And then after about 15 months, it completely died. It had 12 months warranty. So it just didn't work for us. We took ages where we didn't go there again. However, one of my consults, Kyla, who works up in Noosa, she is a big Ego fan. So she's talked us into trialing the Ego equipment, and we have, which is really good. We've got 1 set of it now, a dedicated commercial hedger, and the feedback on that is really good. The crew love using it. They said the cut is amazing. They do find it's heavier though than the petrol equipment because the battery down the bottom just puts their balance off center, and it actually really makes their wrists ache. So
yeah, I think the Ego hedge trimmers are really good. That you've got the commercial one, no doubt, and it is really good, but it's got a little bit of weight to it. Have you got the short one as well?
No, so we're starting to slowly invest some across battery equipment. We had, as I said, we've tried other battery equipment. We've, in my quest to find decent equipment, I've tried Husqvarna combi tools, I've tried Shindoa combi tools, I've tried different ones trying to find what would work for our crew to reinvest our equipment to something that's, more productive. Like I really love steel, they love steel, but the problem is the stupid little pole in the middle when they bend them putting the shafts together or they lose it and it's gone. Like the whole bit of equipment's useless.
I've never been a fan of multi-tools. I've always gone for the dedicated tool rather than the multi-tool, and I've found still been really good with their dedicated tools, but I've never gone to the steel battery lineup.
Yeah, no.
So
we initially tried the battery with the dedicated hedger, but actually maybe a combi. But we have a lot of dedicated still, but then we do have the combi tool that we swap between the pole hedger and the pole saw, just for whatever jobs they're doing there. We do a lot of big hedges, so they really need the combi tool with the extension pole on there or to go through, and being mindful of the amount of equipment you're carrying and the space you've got as well.
Yes.
It's actually beneficial for them to have a multi-tool that they can swap in and out for both jobs than to carry, a full extension pole hedger, a shorter hedger, a chainsaw,
Yeah,
so that works there. And then we obviously have the ride-ons. We have I'm having mental blank, a Kubota commercial ride-on. I think it's 48-inch. And then we have a Husqvarna ride-on as well. Don't ask me that model, but it doesn't have a lock kit. The other one does. We're looking, probably next investments we'll be looking at stand-up ride-ons. And I know we've discussed what you use there, and we're keen to have a bit of a look at that. But equipment's always a big thing. Like I'll run across people that swear by, Husqvarna, or they swear by Shindoa, or they swear by, whatever else comes along. So I think again, personal preference. I think a lot of that comes back to when Dan started his original business. That was the equipment that he used, and it's just what he knows.
Yep, I think a lot of it really does come down to personal preference, and I think there's only a few exceptions there in terms of some brands build a deck that is better for clearing the grass when you're side discharging or filling a catcher, and some of them are much better on the mulching. But overall, you look at what your dealers that you work with on a daily basis support, and have they got a unit that's going to work well for you?
Yep. And you need to know your jobs. Like you need to know if you've got a big slashing job or grass that's this high. It's no good taking the mulch kit mower because you're just going to tear the mulch kit off the bottom. You need to get your side discharged. Like it's the staff knowing how to use the equipment properly as well. And
makes a massive difference.
And then they do have weird things out of the blue that, you'll have a brand new mower and they'll somehow put a massive hole in the cut deck on a Honda HR 216 that's a week old. So there's always there's always challenges. So to the equipment and how it goes, but I think a lot of it is personal preference and what you use. Like I know, as I said, Kyla loves the Ego. She has about 20 batteries that she goes through every day and has all the mowers, and I'm just like, I can't, to have 4 crews with 20 batteries every day, that's 80 batteries, and I'm like, and who's charging all these every night? That's me. No.
I think it'd start to make more sense for the crews to have a backpack battery or two rather than a bunch of smaller batteries in that sense for charging purposes when you're running multiple crews. But I actually interviewed Kyla last week, so her interview is going to come out just before yours.
Okay.
So that'll be good. But I've got a lot of the same gear she's got with Ego, and for the most part, I rate the Ego gear really well. I've found their whippersnipper, their commercial whippersnipper, is just a little bit on the heavy side. You said the same thing about the pole hedge trimmer, but really good tools.
Yeah. Like even I can use it quite well, and I have wrist problems. So when I'm hedging with it, it's good, but not extended. Like some of our big hedges, the crews, will be one of our daughters, Ebony, she benches quite a lot at the gym. As I mentioned, she's really fit and really strong. And even after 2 hours hedging on that, she's aching. She's like, my wrist is sore, it's quite heavy. It's just not that. And, she benches 70 kilos normally. So to actually be holding that, she finds a challenge with the battery that she doesn't find in a still. So I said, we could look at using a backpack and stuff, but we'll have to look into that, but worried about how long the cord is on it. Do you have the same sort of movement?
Yeah. I don't like using the backpack with some of those tools because it changes the balance quite a lot. I've actually found the Husqvarna dedicated short pole hedger my favourite in terms of balance and weight, but I've had a huge amount of problems with it under warranty and then out of warranty. Failure points that shouldn't be failure points. So hopefully they've got a better experience if you buy a brand new one nowadays. But the weight, the balance of the Husqvarna tools, and particularly their lightweight whip snipper and hedge trimmer, they've been really good.
And I think also it comes down to the service areas, like the guys that we use. So we're quite lucky in the fact that Dan's dad does a lot of the servicing on our small equipment, so he can fix most issues. And then we've got Jake who comes in and does the mobile repairs. But if we're stuck, I know I can take our stuff down to our local steel dealer, and because we have so much of it, they'll push us in quick, they'll do whatever, they'll do me a good deal on equipment. So I think it's about the number of equipment you have when you run crews our size as well, because if something's there, you can swap it out for another one, or grab that part off this, and the poles are interchangeable and that sort of stuff. Whereas Husky, that dealer, I dropped off that and it was gone for like 6 weeks. So,
I think that makes a massive difference. And your steel dealer is the same dealer I've used down the Central Coast there. So they're exceptionally good at looking after contractors.
Yeah, they really are. I can just ring up and not even know what I'm talking about, or walk in the shop and say, Dan needs, and he's like, yep, Dan uses this piece, and grabs that off the shelf, and then he likes this one better and he uses this model. And, they really know their customers. So I do, Dave and Chris down at the Gosford Mowers are good with what they do for that. And I guess even though, you can get cheaper than steel and you can get a lot better brand loyalty, in the fact that they support us, we support them as well, I think is a big factor in using a lot of the steel stuff.
The other thing is I like my Ego gear, but if I need to get that worked on, and most people will have a bit of a grudge against Ego when it comes to the fact they're in box stores rather than at local dealers. I've got a brilliant dealer that looks after Ego gear, but it's Newcastle.
Right.
So for you, that's like an hour plus drive.
I got our Ego down from West Gosford at Total Tools, I think.
Yeah,
when we went
which
down
means
there, and I took Kynan, who's one of our staff, and also my son down, and he, you know, he really questioned them everything under the sun, left, right, centre. The guys down there were really good answering all these questions and said, look, mate, the best way for you to know it, here, I'll put it together, go outside and hedge something.
Yep.
So they gave him, he took it outside, he played around with it, he did whatever, and, you know, took it out of the box. So I was so happy with that. And they're like, yep, here you go. If we have to send us off this, he said, but after the warranty, you can just order your parts you need online. You can look at here, here's the portal, you can see where it's at. You know, so their service for a big box store was actually really good. Like, I've read some of the feedback that, you know, it's this, that, the other, but yeah, and being battery, they don't have carburetors that are going to go wrong. Their oil filters are going to work out. Like, there's less bits that can sort of go wrong as long as they're looked after. So
yeah, definitely. That's a big factor to take into account with battery gear. And I've got no problem with buying from the big box stores. I do that too. I think it makes a big difference if you do need support when you're dealing with a brand. And if you, like I say, if you've got still battery gear, you know that Gosford, they're going to look after you there.
Yeah, exactly. So I think,
Yeah, well, I think we have covered almost everything I wanted to talk to you about, Renae. It's been really good talking to you.
Been great talking to you too, Gary. It's good to chat with someone who's a local and also has different insights into the industry, and it's working well.
We should organise a Central Coast contractors catch-up sometime.
I think we definitely should. That'd be good. We can bounce ideas across, and it's good talking to someone else that also has a female employee, because I know we touched before on the challenges with that the girls face. So it's good to know that they're more, you know, coming along in the industry and more recognition.
Yeah, well, I am trying to do more interviews with women in our industry at the moment, because I do want to highlight that and, you know, give them props for the value that they add to the industry.
They do, and they face challenges that we don't even think of. Well, I think about it being a woman, obviously, but, you know, such as when you're out on the day, all day, where do you go to the bathroom? The guys can go behind a tree. You know, like, where do the girls go to the bathroom? Sometimes they need special facilities. Like, you know, there's a lot of different challenges that they do face within there. But I think getting some more support groups, and I'd like to, as I said, often chat to different businesses. I work with Kyla, with, you know, helping with SortScape. I do lots in the fact that I think the industry needs to come more together and see less of each other as competitions, because there's so much work for everyone. Like, and that's what Leo said to me when we talk about force mowing. He's like, I know you're big on the coast, I'm trying to break in the coast. He's like, there's so much work for everyone. There's no need for everyone to be unsupportive. Like,
that's right.
You don't need to be snarky to each other. If you're supportive, then it really, you know, it helps everyone out. So.
And I think that's one thing that LMCA has had a really positive impact on. And there's positives and negatives when we're talking about a large group like that. But that's really positive impact, is that it has made people more supportive and community-minded in our industry, rather than feeling protective and feeling like everybody's
and definitely. And touching back on the women thing, Kyla and I actually run a group. I'm not sure if she told you. It's basically like the ladies in lawn care. Did she mention that one?
I've heard a few things mentioned, because I've interviewed a few ladies, and I've heard this group come up once every now and then. But I seem to be missing something. I've not been invited to it, so I'm not asking for an invite. But I don't know much about it, because
you know, two people with the insider knowledge, but you're not the right gender, unfortunately. We're not being discriminative, but you know. So we've
all good.
Kyla actually chatted to me, and we were discussing, you know, we bounce things back and forth of each other. We're good in the fact that she's the sole trader, runs a crew or two with her husband. I have the multiple crews, so we kind of feed on where it goes, different states, different challenges. And she said to me, hey, I think we need a group that is sort of outside LCMA, that's just for girls, that can be relevant issues. And it is Ladies of Lawn and Landscape, and both her and I are administrators, and it deals with things such as, it's a safe space where any female in the industry can ask questions, where it's simple thing as, you know, what work pants aren't going to give me rash, down to what I use for sunscreen or skincare, or how do I deal with this difficult client that's being really this, or, you know, it's a really sort of uplifting group in the fact that LCMA is really good for the whole wide, but we felt like we just needed a specific group that's supportive for the girls. So we're trying to recognise and bring more recognition to the girls that work in the industry and the challenges they face and how they can navigate a man's world, because it really is traditionally a man's world in the lawn and landscape industry. And
I think that's really good, and I think that group deserves to grow in numbers. There's another lady I was talking to yesterday, and her opinion down south is that there are a lot of women in the industry that their voices are just not heard because they either don't participate in any of the social media or they're not aware of it. And so, if we can get more attention to your group that gives women a safe place to speak up, to be heard, and to share ideas.
If you ask a question, in the fact that we're like, okay, what mower is best to lift for us, instead of some guys making comments about, oh, just go to the gym more. Like, you think, okay, I find this works well for me because it's more lightweight. It's actually supportive in the fact that we recognize we don't have the inherent muscle strength that the guys do. We don't have the bone structure. We can't naturally, you guys can lift 20 kilos each hand, no worries, and we might struggle to lift one. So it's just about how we can work smarter and support each other, sort of developing businesses and the niche businesses and growing within the industry, because I think there is a massive amount of space for women in the industry with the attention to detail. They're softer on the equipment, the whole thing going forward. And, there's big movements now where females really, they live alone or they're elderly or, they just feel comfortable with a girl coming to their house because they're not on the back foot wondering if they're,
Yeah, I've heard of numerous communities where a female lawn mowing contractor is going to feel safe for the customers to be there when they're there on their own, and a male contractor is going to feel unsafe.
Exactly.
But I'd like to throw this in a completely opposite direction. I've recently got asked to join a blokes group called Blokes Advice, and it's been controversial recently. It's been heavily criticised by women because it's a little bit out there, being all blokes, and a couple of things were said publicly that in relation to that group that were, I guess, by women saying how terrible a place it is.
No, so I don't agree with that. I think guys need a safe space too. Another example of a group that has been quite supportive for us is called Tradie Wives, and it was, it was developed by Verity Hare, and she said, and for a while I helped with some administration stuff when it grew big before she had office staff, and it is primarily for tradie wives. You must be a tradie wife or have a husband or a partner, or you yourself work in a tradie business. Now, to offset that, she has tradie husbands or tradie guys or whatever the man version is of that, which is a safe space just for the guys. But I think it's really, I don't agree with this, like, oh, we should just automatically get access. No, guys need a safe space where they can be heard. They have their own issues and their own agendas, and simple thing, as you know, I still work in healthcare, and mental health for guys and tradies is a huge thing because they don't feel safe. Like, they don't feel they can come and go, I had a really hard day today. It's just really black. Don't know why I'm bothered. I wanted to jump off the cliff, without girls going, oh, you're a man. You shouldn't cry. You shouldn't do whatever. Yeah. So I don't agree with that, because girls can be just as bad at giving it back to the opposite sex as guys and as unsupportive. Yeah. So I am all for, if it has to be gender specific, ladies in tradies or guys, lads of lawn mowing, you need a safe space where you guys can connect with each other.
Yeah. Well, I went and told my wife, I said, I'm joining up this group. It's a little bit out there. They post some pictures of women in there and then they carry on a bit. And I said, but there's guys there saying, hey, I'm on the edge. Who can help me? And there's 300,000 guys in the group. There's 1,000 responses. Hey, I'm here for you. I'll answer the phone.
Great. You have to send me the link and I can show it to Dan. Because that's another thing I find, and I've seen it on days with Dan as well, especially when he's a sole trader, or now when he's out by himself. When you are a sole trader, I think more than anyone else, you are isolated all day, every day. You're alone in your thoughts, in your head, doing job after job after job after job after job. So if there's a group like that can support you guys, and it's a safe space to say, hey, I'm having a really crap day, I'm not well. Sometimes people just need to hear someone cares, even if it's a stranger they don't know.
Yep.
I'm all for.
That's it. It is a safe place. It's a safe place for guys to be guys, and that comes with a little bit of out there behaviour, but it's great. And I think the reason I brought that up is to say the fact that you've got a group specifically for women in lawn care and gardening is something which should be given more space. And, we still want the whole community to come together in a place like LMCA or the Australian Professional Contractors Group. But, that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, no, I think we definitely have room as an industry to move in all directions. I'm really passionate about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Renae, thank you so much for your time. I've kept you on this call for a long time this afternoon, but I appreciate your time.
No,
and I think
we've
covered a lot of topics there for people to think about, and hopefully it helps them out.
Perfect. Thank you so very much for having me, and I look forward to hearing what you're doing in the future.
No worries. Thanks.
And if I get hold of Mike Andes, I'll make sure to send me in your direction.
Yeah, well, tell Leo from Fox he owes me an interview. Mike Andes.
Come across these weird connections somehow. I really should. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you for listening to Aussie Lawn Stars. Please remember to rate and review the show on the Apple Podcasts app or the player you use. Exciting new shows are released every Monday. Make sure you follow or subscribe to hear the next episode.